into even pastures less green than that. As further down the pecking order, we had Wales. And 5th place finish, defeat on the final weekend at home to Italy. As title defences go, because they came into this tournament as defending champions, it's pretty ugly reading. It really is. And had they managed to dig that win out even in the performance that they had on that final weekend, then maybe some of these questions would be buried under the rug, as we were saying, or be kind of offset, or they were able to gloss over them with a good win on the last week. But no, with that historic moment burned into everyone's brains now, particularly the Welsh, there's a lot of questions that need answering. It was a pretty messy year all round, and it didn't start at the beginning of the Six Nations. It was ugly to the tail end of last year throughout, and the club sides are not performing well in either comp either. So there's a lot of inward reflection going on in Wales, and where is the talent? There's a lot of talent drained. Some of their best talent is playing in the Premiership, which doesn't help in terms of match prep either. But just in terms of what we saw on the pitch from this Wales outfit, they were combative, they were wily at times, but the back row being completely blown away and impotent against all of the top level teams they came against. Their offence, while beautiful and clinical last year with minimal ball, now we saw them operating with similar minimal ball and being not quite as sharp as they were, and not really able to get things up.
Sharp.
That's a generous way of phrasing it.
Awful,
they were pretty all over the place.
It's a curious one, isn't it? I mean, this time last year they had a crystal clear identity. And it was very, very different. It was diametrically opposed in some ways to what was going on at the World Cup.
Yeah.
Where they were, it was still the Warren Gatland team. It was still bigger, and Liam Williams are the key men, and Alan Wynne-Jones and Jay Davis. And while we do play lovely offence, we can change up how we play. We lean on our defence and we lean on our kicking game, and that carries us through big, tight games against good opposition. And we're elite at doing that. Then this time last year, they weren't that team. If you recall, Bigger was trading jerseys with Callum Sheedy, who was running a very good offence in Bristol and was moving the pill very well himself. They were exciting. They did have George North in the midfield who'd come in and rattle things up, but they were striking off set piece, and they were striking off multi-phase, and they were running patterns, and they were looking to get to the edge consistently, attacking from everywhere, riding their luck at times, but also being sharp and being the team that was alert to where the try was at any given moment, tapping and going penalties, looking for tries all day, every day, be it through kick passes, be it through chip aheads, or through getting wide into space, getting Reece Sammet on the pill in a bit of room, see if he can work some magic, keep it going, keep hunting tries. Just a team that was not 100% a complete team, was a great team in many ways, but they weren't coping that well physically. They were holding their own at best at set piece, but certainly weren't getting any gains there. And they weren't even that good in the kicking game. Their kicking game was pretty poor last year. But they were finding tries at a better rate than anyone else, because that's what they were designed to do. They were hunting them. And in that model, they were quite an interesting team to look at. And they managed to win a tournament. People say they rode their luck. They'd red cards. They'd bounce enough balls. But the reality is that they were the most clinical, aggressive, offensive team in the tournament. Yeah, their
red zone efficiency was the stat that came out of that one, where they were just spending so little time for so much return in the opposition red zone, and it was great.
Players cutting mean angles off one another, some lovely patterns, and then just a great hustle in terms of getting to the line. And then they rocked up to this tournament after a tough time of it in the off season, and some dipping form in some other players. But it was right back to wily defensive kicking,
defensive line out kicking.
Our best strength is our up and under, and our poaching a line out here or there, or the game against France. I mean, the game against France was like a textbook brilliant performance, very similar to their World Cup semi-final performance. It just came short, and was they were one pass away from getting a win against a great team. In a low scoring, kick heavy encounter where we played pretty much a perfect game outside of the opposition 22, and then that was it. And unfortunately the offense couldn't quite deliver on what the defense and the kicking game had set up for them. But it was completely opposed to the way they were playing last year, and I'm just wondering why that is. And then they tried to go back to it in the last game against Italy, and it was totally uncoordinated, out of sync against a surprisingly good defence that completely caught them with their pants down and consistently turned over the ball. And part of it has to do with the lack of confidence they have in their offensive breakdown and the technical work they're doing there, but they're just not committing to an offensive game, and I think they're
also not committing to a selection idea, to be honest, because they've chopped and changed the whole time. Like, it was Basham after some good work in autumn to start the tournament, but then Navidi was back in by the end to try and fix it, but it was all for not, like, everyone, they were losing all those battles ultimately, despite some courageous moments from all of those guys.
Faletau came in and had an absolutely brilliant game, and then he comes out in the Italy game and has a shocker. Everything about them was inconsistent, but I still think that, like, Wales need to combine their sort of wiliness and their sharp kicking with, like, a relentless hunt for tries.
I do think that needs to be what the way their halfbacks are wired, all of them to a man, and just the way they're built to attack like that. Guys like Tompkins out wide, if they can get him involved more, or even whoever they're picking in the midfield, they like, their whole back line does seem built to try and run the pill, and yet they did not manage to get a cohesive offensive shape really to challenge or stress any of the top level defenses they found this year. They weren't a match.
They scored all. They managed three tries against Italy, but that was kind of
a struggle for them. They turfed a lot more than that, and under, like, the line speed that Italy were bringing was good, but it shouldn't have been forcing the wild passes that it was forcing out of them. And just a discombobulated look for Wales. And it's tough to gloss over it. A good win over Scotland to do for Scotland's campaign. That was probably the closest they got to a real highlight in terms of the whole tournament and the whole campaign.
Well, it was the one win they got. But I mean, they had one try against Ireland, one try against Scotland. 3 against England, none against France, 3 against...
And that try against Ireland was thrown to them as well. It was thrown at Basham, wasn't it? It wasn't the offence generated a try, it was actually their defence managed to gobble up a bit of loose Irish play. So from an offensive point of view, it's night and day different from the story of 2021.
And it's not just the case that the odd lucky pass was sticking. They created some lovely flowing moves. I think universally across the tournament there wasn't a diligent enough concerted effort to strike off set piece. There's a lot of kind of these basic hit up plays, a lot of slow ball,
smash it up and then kick was a go-to strategy from Wales.
They can't be that team. They like, this is supposed to be Pivac's Wales from last year. They need to be the team that gets the edge, that stretches defences, that tests a 13 channel.
Guys like Louis Rees-Zammit and Josh Adams looking a bit less bewildered and frustrated out there, and looking more
on the ball, exactly, and not in a crash ball context, but actually out there in a bit of space, working their guys into some space, and then kicking on the front foot if it's not on. But the bigger Williams kicking acumen, it is good. It's not a bad thing to have in a team. I think Liam Williams is still very much a fulcrum of this team. They do need someone to step up and threaten Bigger's jersey. Bigger's great in so many ways. He's got lovely... Like, he's got toughness, he's got game management.
Actually, both those guys do have a very kind of wiry strength to them. That is, like, it builds into the toughness of the team. They're very tough and very kind of difficult to shake off. They don't never say die attitude, and very game in the tight exchanges. That's all very good.
But the balance of the team was better when it was trading him and Sheedy, when either one or the other of them started,
or even
and the other
then,
came on and changed
Anscombe
things.
was riddled with injury when he was just coming into good form. But they had that little dynamic briefly in even towards the tail end of Warren Gatland's one, when they were trying to transition into having a bit more of a running offense, when they had a different 10 in and then Bigger in for the kicking offense. Yes, that balance just means they're more flexible. Like, by the end of Warren Gatland's tenure, we were crediting them as being like the utility or the Swiss Army knife of teams. Like, they can go into places wherever games want to be played and try and play them that way. They've definitely lost a few strings to their bow in this.
They can't find a try when they need one. They can't, like, if it killed them, they can barely find a try if they need one, and they have some really great players out wide. I'm not necessarily on board with the doom and gloom outlook. They haven't got the talent and they're not going to be able to compete. Like, obviously they're it's not that they don't have the talent. Like, they are a great rugby loving nation, and they produce a load of high quality rugby players, probably disproportionate number to their population. But there's also truth that there's, like, systemic problems in the way that it's being run. That's like, it was always a bit shocking what the great job that Warren Gatland does in terms of making mountains out of molehills. In terms of, like, their club form was always patchy. The Ospreys were always disappointing, even when they had that superstar world beater team that had Jerry Collins and Tommy Bowe and the Wales national
national team that were winning Grand Slams, and it was like, why is this team not like 3-time European champions? And it's like, well, probably because systemically they're not doing a lot of things correctly, and it's remained true, and like they've always had a galvanizing effect when they pull on the red jersey of Wales. Like guys like Navidi just grow in stature. All of the guys have that good tendency, but we didn't see that this year. And that's where these kind of niggling doubts and kind of nightmarish thoughts do start circling when your last game is what that was when it was it's always tough on the last day of the tournament because that's what you have to sit with until summer tours, and even they aren't home games, so it's a long degree of separation for your fan base, and it means that you end up needling at a lot of these questions
there's two schools of thought. I mean, they were poor in this competition. They have had some poor, they've been some clangers in the past, and they've come back and won Six Nations titles.
I'm not suggesting Wales are done for. That's
but I mean, where do you think they sit now in terms of under Pivac? Would you be confident that he can take them to a World Cup, navigate them out of their group and give a go of quarter final into a semi potentially?
For similar reasons to the Eddie Jones thing, I think that's what's going to happen. Is he's taking them to this World Cup for better or worse.
Oh no, I know, but I mean, just how do you like they're going to be in a group with Georgia and Fiji and Australia. The first port of call is going to be to get their way out of that group, preferably top of it, and then have a crack at whoever comes out of the corresponding group and get themselves to a semi-final like they did the last time out. It's a similar pool to last time. Do you see them going as well?
But like they definitely have the tools to do so. They'll be worrying. Like those are all tough games. It's a fun pool, so it is. But they're like I'm not saying they're completely off the track. We can see that they have the talent. They also have the clutch in all the opposite ways that we were critical of Scotland. They do have some top level clutch that sees them in games like that France game, where you feel like on paper every aspect of this game is going to France, and yet here we are in the final quarter or final play, and it's a 1-score game. And like they do have all kinds of good quality like team identity just kind of ingrained in them, and I do have faith that Pivac can get them moving a bit if he tries to, I guess. But we're going to need to start seeing some dividends on the pitch at some point soon, because like since that Six Nations campaign, it's been a horrendous track record that started with during the Lions tour, their kind of Wales A outfit getting hosed by a pretty poor Pumas side, as it turned out, and they didn't really recover from that. It's been pretty poor showing since they got pumped by the All Blacks. They
did have a defiant win over makeshift Oz.
They did have that defiant win over makeshift Oz, and a win over Scotland, as we were pointing out, in the Six Nations since. But it's not a lot, and not probably enough, despite some guys like Tompkins have improved in those interior.
Tompkins is a quality player. They need to recommit to offense. Like, they had a good defense in this competition. They had a surprisingly good scrum.
They often do. Wyn Jones is still a quality asset for them.
So I mean, I just think they need to recommit to playing the same kind of offensive footy they were playing last year. Try and attack from the middle of the field, try and strike, try and be lethal, try and get your wingers involved. It's boom, 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 1, 2, 3 phases, and after that you kick. And you've got to really try and stress a defence in those 3 phases. Not just hit it up, and then if you don't see something right there, we're going straight to a kick. They need to be more creative. They need to be more determined to find tries.
They do.
Keep the pace of the game high and play some good traditional Welsh rugby, which they were doing last year under Pivac. They just does
involve being more accurate at the offensive breakdown. You're saying all of these are work-ons. Set piece will be a work-on as well. But macro points, they need to rediscover who they are, and part of that is quick thinking, offensive stuff, as well as the wily, tricky defensive stuff. They haven't quite got the balance entirely right. Even in that Six Nations they won last year, they were only getting like 30% of the ball in every game, when they were like, why is that the case? And probably that goes back to some of that breakdown issue that's still lingering. So work-ons for Wales for sure, but not all doom and gloom despite it, but definitely some wounds to be licking.
Potentially a pack that'll struggle to compete with the big teams next year. Potentially
true.
Guys like the makeup of it.
Guys like Beard haven't quite kicked on, I guess, since his Lions birth, and he was brilliant last year.
Whatever's in behind him, I mean, Beard and Rowlands is fine, but it's not as good as what some of the other teams are going to be rolling out.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's the same with the scrum and everywhere else. So we'll see how it goes for Wales. I do think that they're potentially up against it as a forward pack going forward, but hopefully they turn it around and just become quick and sharp and make up for it that way.
Well, this is it. Thank you for tuning in to the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed what you hear, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below as well. We enjoy hearing your opinions too. Thank you.